There is something you carry the moment you enter a room. Before you speak, before you smile, before your presence even registers consciously, it is already felt. A rare aura that only true empaths possess. It is not visible, but unmistakable. Some sense it as comfort, others feel it as threat. But it never goes unnoticed. What you carry is not merely sensitivity. It is not just kindness or intuition. It is something deeper, something far older than your conscious identity. Carl Jung called it the inheritance of the wounded healer, an archetype that radiates from those who have felt more than they could process, survived more than they could understand, and yet emerged with the capacity to heal what they themselves could not escape. This aura is not born from peace. It is forged through fire. It is not a glow of natural goodness, but the psychic field of a soul that has undergone what Jung would call psychological alchemy, the transmutation of suffering into perception. You see, true empathy is not just emotional resonance. It is shadow turned into vision. It is the unconscious made conscious through the body, through the nervous system, through a life that had no choice but to feel deeply in order to survive. And it comes with a paradox. The same aura that heals attracts both light and shadow. It draws the lost, the seekers, and the wounded. But it also lures projection, chaos, and energetic predators. And if the empath does not understand the nature of this aura, if they remain unconscious of its frequency, it becomes less a gift and more a prison. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now let us look deeper into the origin of this rare frequency and the unseen process that shaped it. If you carry the empath's aura, you were likely not born into safety. You were born into vigilance. Long before you had language, your nervous system was reading emotional weather patterns for survival. You became, as Jung wrote, a vessel for transformation, but not by choice. You were shaped by necessity. Perhaps you grew up in a household where love was conditional, dependent on mood, behavior, silence. Or perhaps there was someone volatile, a parent, a caregiver, whose emotional state determined whether you were safe or shamed. In such environments, your own feelings became secondary. You learned to suppress them, and instead, you began tracking others. Before you could read words, you could read faces. Before you could write, you could map tension in a room. You were forced to develop what Jung would recognize as hyper-vigilant emotional perception. And neuroscience now supports this. Mirror neurons become overactive in highly sensitive individuals. The limbic system, the emotional brain, becomes exquisitely responsive. The body becomes an emotional antenna. But this antenna does not simply receive signals. It transforms them. And it begins in childhood, with the unconscious realization, if I can feel what others feel, maybe I can prevent what hurts. And so your aura, this rare, magnetic, often overwhelming field, was not a divine blessing. Not at first. It was survival, a radar system built from broken trust, a sensitivity born not of serenity, but of trauma. As Jung understood, the empath's gifts are not genetic traits. They are psychic adaptations, forged through necessity and refined through suffering. Your body became permeable. Your psyche became porous. You absorbed unspoken grief, filtered repressed rage, sensed fear that others hadn't yet named. And over time, this absorption began to shape your very sense of self. But without awareness, this mechanism, this deeply intelligent sensitivity, turns into self-erasure. You become everyone's mirror, everyone's safe space, everyone's balm. But you lose the ability to feel what is truly yours. Jung referred to this condition as participation mystique, a state where the boundaries between self and other dissolve unconsciously, where you are no longer witnessing another's emotions, but becoming them. And so, the empathic aura is born, not as a glow of purity, but as an ancient survival code, a blend of biology, psychology, and archetype, waiting to be understood before it consumes the one who carries it. Now that we've seen the roots of this aura, let's explore how it operates, not only as a frequency, but as a kind of psychological radar, scanning the hidden landscape of human emotion the moment you enter the room. The empath's aura is not passive. It does not simply absorb, it scans. The moment you walk into a room, your nervous system begins what Jung might call energetic archaeology, an unconscious excavation beneath surface appearances, digging for emotional truth others haven't yet named. This is not imagination. This is instinct. The aura functions as what Jung described through the transcendent function, a psychic process that holds opposites in tension, allowing transformation to occur. It begins with the energetic scan. Your aura attunes to what Jung called feeling-toned complexes, unconscious emotional patterns that color a person's perception, behavior, and presence. These complexes are not visible, but you feel them. Next comes unconscious absorption. Because your psychic boundaries were made permeable by early trauma, you absorb emotions without conscious choice. Jung termed this the participation mystique, where your psyche unconsciously identifies with another's inner state. Their grief becomes your heaviness. Their rage becomes your irritability. Their fear becomes your anxiety. But the rarest part of your empathic aura is the third stage, emotional alchemy. Unlike ordinary emotional entanglement, the empath processes these raw, unspoken energies through the transcendent function, transmuting chaos into clarity, pain into wisdom, emotion into insight. You don't simply carry others' feelings, you metabolize them, refine them, return them back as resonance. This is why people say, "I feel better around you," even when you've said nothing. Your presence performs unconscious alchemy. But here lies the danger. If you are unaware of this process, if you do not consciously engage it, you become what Jung warned of, a wounded healer who bleeds endlessly. Without awareness, the radar scans, absorbs, and processes, all without boundaries. And the empath becomes not a mirror, not a sanctuary, but a sponge. Eventually, a vessel so full that it cracks. That's why Jung emphasized the necessity of individuation, the process of making the unconscious conscious. Because until you understand your radar, your aura will continue to attract and absorb energies that were never yours to carry. And now, we come to the magnetic field of this aura, the attraction patterns it sets in motion, for better or worse. If you are a true empath, you've likely noticed a strange duality in the people drawn to you. Some enter your life with depth, awareness, authenticity. Others seem chaotic, draining, inexplicably heavy, as if your light awakens not their healing, but their hunger. This is not random. Carl Jung observed that energy, especially unconscious energy, follows archetypal patterns. Your aura, forged through trauma and transmutation, carries a resonance that activates these patterns in others. The most common attraction is the wounded child archetype. These are individuals carrying unresolved childhood trauma. They're drawn to your aura because it radiates what they never received, unconditional witnessing. You feel like home to them. not because you are safe, but because you are familiar with pain. Your presence tells them, you will not be abandoned. And so, they attach. Then comes the shadow projector. Those who have disowned aspects of themselves. Their shame, their rage, their grief, too unbearable to confront, are projected onto you. Your aura becomes a repository for what they refuse to feel. They may accuse you of being too much, too emotional, too intense, not realizing they are reacting to their own disowned emotions reflected back through you. And then, the most dangerous, the energy vampire. Jung called them psychological parasites, individuals whose own empathic development was stunted. They have learned to survive not by connection, but by extraction. They seek out empathic auras like yours because your nervous system unconsciously regulates theirs. These are the people who trauma dump, generate crises, and keep you trapped in cycles of endless support. They do not want healing. They want your energy. But the picture is not all dark. Jung also recognized that certain archetypes are drawn to you in order to evolve, not consume. The conscious seeker is one such soul. These are individuals doing their own inner work, drawn to your presence not to be saved, but to grow. They sense that your aura mirrors their potential. They resonate rather than depend. Then there is the authentic self, people who are learning to feel deeply without shame. Your presence gives them permission to be human, not fixed, not perfect, just real. And most beautifully, there are the individuated souls, those who have integrated their own light and shadow. When they meet you, there is no entanglement, no projection, only recognition. These relationships are rare. But when they happen, they are nourishing beyond words. But here lies the most dangerous pitfall of the empath's aura: archetypal confusion. Without awareness, you cannot tell the difference between the seeker and the parasite, between someone who comes to heal and someone who comes to feed. The same wound that gives you the ability to transform others can also blind you to their true intentions. And so, you overgive. You overstay. You try to transform someone who isn't ready. And in the process, your aura dims. Your nervous system frays. You begin to call it fate. But as Jung would remind us, it is not fate. It is unconsciousness. And the moment you begin to see these archetypal patterns clearly, the moment you name them, you begin to reclaim your aura, not as something to be taken, but as something to be directed. What happens when an empath's aura reflects what others are not yet ready to see? This is the paradox of the empathic presence. Your aura functions not as a sponge, but as a mirror. And like any mirror, it reveals truth, not just light, but shadow. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The empath's aura, tuned to emotional truth, does not distort what it reflects. It amplifies it. And for those who are conscious, this reflection feels like resonance. But for those who are unconscious, it feels like confrontation. There are three primary mirror responses that empaths tend to evoke, and each reveals something crucial about the person standing before them. The first is the conscious mirror response. These are the people who say, "I feel so calm around you," or "You help me remember who I really am." What they are sensing is their own inner light being reflected back by your aura. Jung called this recognition resonance, the feeling of being truly seen without judgment. In these moments, empathy becomes awakening. The second is the unconscious mirror response. This is when someone feels disturbed by your presence and doesn't know why. They may criticize your sensitivity, label you as intense, or try to provoke a reaction that brings you down to their emotional level. This is not about you. It is about the anxiety stirred by their unintegrated shadow being reflected back through your calm. And then, the third, the predatory mirror response. These are the emotional vampires, individuals who perceive your gift not as a mirror, but as a resource to exploit. They may disguise their needs as crisis or chaos and slowly train you to become their emotional regulator. Your empathy becomes their escape hatch. Your presence becomes their supply. But here is the truth. You are not responsible for the emotions that others refuse to process. Your aura is not a landfill for denied feelings. It is a field of clarity. And when you begin to recognize these mirror dynamics, you can choose not to react, not to absorb, but to reflect with discernment. Because ultimately, the mirror is not meant to become the person it reflects. It is meant to stand still, to shine clearly, and in doing so, to reveal. Yet your aura does not only mirror individuals. It mirrors something far larger, something Jung called the collective unconscious. Jung described the collective unconscious as a psychic field that holds the shared memories, symbols, traumas, and instincts of all humanity. And empaths, especially those attuned to subtle emotional fields, often serve as what he called collective antennas. Have you ever felt an inexplicable sadness during world events, even before you read the headlines? Have you found yourself overcome by anxiety in crowded places or drained by environments where many people carry unspoken tension? You're not imagining it. Your nervous system is tuned to something transpersonal. The empath's aura doesn't just pick up individual emotions, it resonates with the psychic atmosphere of communities, cultures, even entire nations. You feel collective sorrow. You grieve for what others have numbed. You anticipate upheaval before it arrives. Jung believed that such sensitivity was a kind of early warning system, one that perceives archetypal eruptions before they surface into mass behavior. These archetypes often appear symbolically, especially in dreams. And for empaths, dreams are not idle fantasies. They are messages from the unconscious. A serpent may appear, coiled and shedding, symbolizing transformation and the renewal of boundaries. A deer may walk through your dream, vulnerable and silent, reminding you to protect your sensitivity without closing your heart. An owl may perch in darkness, a sign that your insight can pierce illusions, even when others are blind. Storms may rage in your dreamscape, not simply weather, but emotional turbulence. A lost child may call out, not someone else's child, but your own forgotten innocence, longing to be protected, witnessed, and reclaimed. These images are not random. They are the language of the unconscious, communicating through metaphor what words cannot hold. And your empathic aura is naturally fluent in this language, even when your mind has not yet translated it. But without conscious awareness, this connection to the collective becomes overwhelming. You begin to carry burdens that are not yours, absorb suffering you cannot name, drown in oceans of emotion without knowing where the shore is. That is why Jung insisted. Empaths must learn to discern what is theirs and what is not. Otherwise, the collective unconscious becomes not a field of insight, but a flood. Because feeling the world's pain is not your burden. It is your invitation to become conscious, to become sovereign, to become a mirror, not a martyr. Carl Jung taught that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For the empath, this process is not optional. It is essential. Because hidden within your aura, beneath your compassion, your intuition, your openness, lives another presence, one that holds the emotions you've suppressed to survive. Jung called this the shadow. For empaths, the shadow is often not aggression or malice. It is self-preservation, anger, boundaries, the primal instincts you were taught to reject in order to stay safe, to be loved, to remain the good one. But this goodness comes at a cost. Without your shadow, your aura leaks. You say yes when you mean no. You give what you do not have. You call exhaustion compassion and overgiving love. Jung called this bleeding energy, the aura of the wounded healer who has not yet healed themselves. Yet inside the shadow lies your power, the ability to say, no more, the rage that protects your innocence, the discernment that refuses to be used. These are not weaknesses. They are the roots of sovereignty. Jung taught that shadow work is the bridge to individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious into consciousness, of becoming whole. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. To walk this path, the empath must sit with the parts of themselves they fear most. The guilt for not saving everyone, the shame for needing rest, the resentment of being unseen. These are not flaws. They are messengers, calling you back to your center. When you allow the shadow to speak, not as a threat, but as a guide, your aura begins to transform. No longer porous. No longer leaking, but clear, contained, alive. You stop absorbing. You begin reflecting. You stop identifying with the wound. You begin embodying the healer. And this is where the true transformation begins. From the wounded healer to the sovereign healer. The wounded healer absorbs. The sovereign healer radiates. The wounded healer says, "Let me carry your pain." The sovereign healer says, "Let me reflect your strength." As this transformation unfolds, your aura changes state. It moves from sponge to mirror to sanctuary. It becomes a space where others can heal, not because you are healing them, but because your very presence awakens their own healing potential. This is not a metaphor. It is energetic fact. Like a candle in a dark room, you do not chase the shadows. You simply remain lit. And in doing so, you become a lighthouse, a steady beacon, guiding others who are ready to see. But even the brightest light must be protected. And so, your sanctuary needs boundaries. Jung wrote, "Boundaries are not walls. They are membranes. They allow love in, but keep manipulation out. A healthy aura does not barricade itself from connection. It chooses when and how to connect. It discerns what nourishes and what depletes. Your garden must have a gate. Without one, everyone will trample through, and you will mistake self-sacrifice for love. But with a living boundary, your inner garden blooms. People are welcomed in when they are ready. And when they are not, you simply close the gate. Not out of cruelty, but out of respect for the life you are cultivating within. In this state, empathy becomes conscious empathy, the ability to feel with others without dissolving into them. It is what Jung called the integration of opposites. Sensitivity and strength, openness and discernment, compassion and sovereignty. And here, the aura begins to stabilize. No longer fluctuating with the chaos of others, no longer distorted by unmet needs. It becomes steady, resilient, a field of presence. And people feel it. They sense that you have walked through fire and emerged whole. Not because you were untouched, but because you learned how to tend to your own flame. Carl Jung believed that the individual's path to wholeness contributes directly to the evolution of humanity. This is the final calling of the empath. not merely to heal others, but to serve as a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, between the individual and the collective. Your rare aura was never meant to make you a savior. It was meant to make you an awakener. When others stand in your presence and you are rooted in your truth, no longer over-identifying with your wounds, something shifts, not because you give them energy, but because your clarity becomes a mirror through which they finally see themselves. This is how collective healing begins. One person, fully integrated, fully conscious, fully alive, becomes a ripple in the collective unconscious. Their presence reminds others, you too can feel everything and still remain whole. You're not here to carry the world's pain. You're here to show the world how to transmute it. How to walk through the storm and still protect the candle. How to reflect darkness without absorbing it. How to love deeply and fully without losing yourself. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And if you are an empath, becoming who you truly are means no longer being defined by your sensitivity, but choosing how to wield it, not as a burden, not as a curse, but as a sacred tool of consciousness. So if these words resonate with something long hidden within you, perhaps it's time to stop apologizing for your light, time to reclaim your aura, time to embody the sovereign empath the world quietly waits for.